So at the outset, I would like to thank IAP Thiruvananthapuram and also KGMOA for giving me this opportunity to talk on rational use of antibiotics in office practice. We all know that bacteria was the first cellular organism which evolved in the earth, and man actually made his appearance millions of years after the origin of bacteria. And in the early stages, the most common cause of death was infectious diseases. Then what happened was the man became smart and invented antimicrobials. And a lot of people actually thought that by the invention of antimicrobials, the infectious diseases will disappear from the earth. But what happened was the bacteria became smarter and developed antimicrobial resistance. What we need to know is that bacteria is there in the earth for millions of years, and whenever we find a compound which is effective against bacteria, it is by their survival mechanism they will develop resistance. So that is what is happening now, and we have infections with antimicrobial resistant bacteria. Let us just see what is the amount of problem. This is the projected death due to antimicrobial and due to AMR, and that means antimicrobial resistant organism. Nowadays, this is before the COVID pandemic, and death attributed to AMR was around 7 lakh per year. When you compare it with cancer, which is the leading cause of death worldwide, it is around 8.2 million. So it is only 1/10 of cancer deaths. But it is projected that by the year 2050, the death due to mortality due to AMR organism that will overtake even cancer. And it is projected that somewhere around 10 million deaths per year can occur by 2050 if we are going in this current phase of using antibiotics. We always think that whenever you have antimicrobial resistant organism, we think that this is actually a disease of the Western countries and all, because we have a lot of literature from there. In India, we don't have literature or studies. They are very minimal when you compare with the West. But the thing is that when we look at the projected mortality, we can see that the maximum number of deaths by AMR organisms are projected to occur in Africa and Asia. In Asia, around 9 per 10,000 million people will die due to infection by AMR organism. That is the problem that we are facing. Unless we do something, unless we do the correct antimicrobial stewardship, this is what is going to happen in a few years. So what can we do to prevent this drug resistance? Where we have only two measures. The first thing is antibiotic stewardship. So what is antibiotic stewardship? Simply speaking, it is giving the right antibiotic in the right time to the right patient. We need to give antibiotics only if it is a bacterial infection. Okay, and along with that, we need to do a stringent infection control measures to prevent the spread of infection. Why we insist on this rational use of antibiotics? Because along with the increasing antibiotic resistance, we also have a drying up of pipelines of newer antibiotics. We don't have much of antibiotics which are going to come in the recent years. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to have a very stringent use, a very correct use of antibiotic, very correct antibiotic use. So how will you decide on antibiotics for a common infection? That is what we are going to cover today. We are actually not going to go into the details of a treatment of a critically ill child or a child with severe infections such as meningitis, sepsis, and all. We are going to cover only those infections that we are usually seeing in the office practice. Okay, so when a child is coming to us with fever, the first thing that we need to do before starting antibiotics is actually to make an accurate clinical diagnosis. We need to do a complete clinical examination and first elicit a complete history, then do a clinical examination and do the relevant investigations before we reach a clinical diagnosis. Then Once you have a clinical diagnosis, we need to know what are the etiological agent or agents which can be responsible for this diagnosis. And then we need to think, is antibiotic really required in this patient? As Bennet sir was talking, most of the patients who are coming to us with fever are mainly due to viral fever. So in those conditions, in viral infection, there is no need for us to prescribe an antibiotics. There is no scenario in which we just need to give an antibiotic just in case. Just in case the child develops pneumonia, I will prescribe an antibiotic. That should be avoided. That is the thing that we are doing nowadays. And if we want to start an antibiotic, we need to know the dose, the correct dose, the frequency, duration. You need to know the interactions and dose adjustment. And also lastly, we also need to know whether my patient is likely to have an infection with a drug resistant organism or a drug sensitive organism. So these are the things we need to think about before we start antibiotic. We will go through a few case scenario on how to decide on antibiotic. We will start with skin infection. Okay, so this is a 1-year-old baby with pyoderma. Child is not having any fever. So first we will discuss what we will do for a child with pyoderma. Pyoderma is otherwise known as impetigo. It's a very superficial infection of the dermis only. Epidermis only. So there are actually two types of impetigo or pyoderma. Here we can see a non-bullous impetigo or impetigo contagiosa. This is usually due to streptococcus. And this usually occurs following trauma. And this is the second type of pyoderma where you see bullous lesions. You can see the bullae, flaccid bullae, which contains the fluid. This will rupture and give an ulcer. And this is usually used due to staphylococcus. So these are the two common organisms that produces pyoderma. And this is another lesion which is known as ecthyma, which is a more deeper lesion. You can see the punched out lesions. This is also usually due to Streptococcus pyogenes. What we need to know about group B Streptococcus is that this is an organism which is still sensitive to penicillin. Penicillin was the first antibiotic that we discovered. And this is an organism which is still sensitive to penicillin and cephalosporin. It has not developed any penicillin resistance to date, but it is resistant to macrolides. A lot of Streptococcus has acquired resistance to macrolide due to the rampant use of macrolide. As we said, or as Dr. Riaz was talking earlier, we use azithromycin left and right. That is why even the Streptococcus, which is an organism which has the least ability to develop resistance, has also occurred resistance to macrolide. Then the second organism that we were talking about was the Staphylococcus aureus, which produces bullous impetigo. Since our patient is coming from the community, most likely he may be having a methicillin sensitive staph aureus, that is known as MSSA. And MSSA will respond to the usual antibiotics like cloxacillin, first generation cephalosporin. It will also respond to amoxicillin and macrolides. But some cases it may even be due to community acquired MRSA. Some of the MRSA are there in the community. And in those cases, we may need to give antibiotics like doxycycline, clindamycin, or cotrimoxazole. So these are the antibiotics that can be used for pyoderma. But should you prescribe an antibiotic for all patients with pyoderma? Actually, we need not prescribe. If the patient is having localized infection, a few pyodermas only, we can prescribe local antibacterial creams such as mupirocin, fusidic acid, ribavarin, everything is available. So these can be prescribed. If the patient is having widespread lesions, lot of lesions, deep lesions, face and neck lesions, or if the lesions are there in the small infant, then we can start on antibiotic or on oral antibiotic. Cephalexin is the most commonly used one. Cephalexin is a very good drug for gram-positive organism, both Staphylococcus and Streptococcus. So cephalexin is the one that is preferred. Then we can also give cephadroxil or coamoxiclav. The thing is that we need to decrease our use of co-amoxiclav also, because co-amoxiclav is a broader spectrum antibiotic. It is effective even for gram-negative organisms. So as we were speaking, skin infections, pyoderma is mainly due to gram-positive organisms. So it's better that we restrict our antibiotics to cefalexin or ceftriaxone, or even cloxacillin can be given. If the patient is not improving, we need to think about community-acquired MRSA, and we need to give either doxycycline, clindamycin, or cotrimoxazole, depending upon your patient. And some children will come to us with recurrent pyoderma. Pyoderma is coming again and again. This usually occurs when the patient or the caregivers are harboring Staphylococcus aureus, especially in their nasal cavity or in the umbilicus. In those states, the Staphylococcus aureus can remain there. So in those conditions, what we need to do is to eradicate the staph from the body. We can ask the mother to use a soap which contains antibacterials like triclosan or chlorhexidine. And also we can give nasal muprocin for patients and caregivers. Frequent change of bed linen and personal hygiene is also important. And if the patient is not responding, we can give a prophylactic dose of clindamycin for 3 months. Okay, that completes the superficial infection pyoderma. We will go to the other skin infection. These infections, the first infection is folliculitis. This is folliculitis. You can clearly see the infection is around all the hair follicles. This is furunculosis, which is a more deeper infection. You can see the surrounding eczema and all. So this is furunculosis. And the next advanced stage is carbamylase. And these babies, the first one, you can see that patient is having a very superficial infection. On the face, we can see the pudgy orange type of skin. That means there is epidermis involvement, and it has a very well demarcated lesion. This is known as erysipelas. It is commonly associated with streptococcal infection. And cellulitis is also there. Cellulitis is usually due to streptococcus or staphylococcus, but in some cases it may be due to gram-negative organisms. It may be due to pneumococcus. It may be due to H. influenza, or sometimes even polybacterial. Then whenever a patient is having cellulitis, we need to be aware of the necrotizing fasciitis also. How to differentiate between necrotizing fasciitis and cellulitis is that in necrotizing fasciitis, tenderness will extend even beyond the erythematous area, because the infection spreads along the fascia. This is also usually produced by Streptococcus pyogenes only, but it is a very severe and very rapidly progressing condition. Unless we do the correct management, patient may end up in a fasciotomy, extensive fasciotomy. So this is a condition where we need to be very aware of. So these are the skin and soft tissue lesions. Then how to manage skin and soft tissue lesions? This is the IDC recommendations of 2014. Skin and soft tissue infections are classified into 2 groups. First is purulent and the second is non-purulent. Purulent conditions include the carbuncles, folliculitis and abscess. Non-purulent infections where there is no pus formation include cellulitis, erysipelas, and necrotizing fasciitis. When you have purulent lesions, we think about staphylococcus. It could be MSSA or community-acquired MRSA. And when you have non-purulent infection, the primary organism is streptococcus. Still, these are the 2 common organisms that produce skin and soft tissue infection. And these infections can be classified into 3 types. Mild infection when there is no systemic signs, and moderate infection when there is some systemic signs like fever, and a severe infection when the patient has severe systemic signs like high fever and chills, tachycardia, tachypnea, organ involvement, that is severe infection. And if the patient is having no response to IND with oral antibiotics, that is also a severe infection. And any infection occurring in immunocompromised is also a severe infection. So how to treat will depend upon this classification. So if it is a purulent infection with staphylococcus, if it is a mild one, we just need to do the INT. Just let out the pus, usually it will heal. If the patient has moderate infection, that means child has fever also, Then along with IND, we will give oral antibiotics. And whenever we do IND, always make sure that we send the pus for culture, because that will guide in our further treatment. As we said earlier, the infection may be due to sensitive MSSA, methicillin sensitive staph, or a resistant staph. If you get a culture, you will be able to further modify our antibiotics depending upon the culture results. And for a moderate infection, oral antibiotics, the preferred ones are cefalexin or cloxicillin. And if we suspect community acquired MRSA, we can give doxycycline, cotrimoxazole, or clindamycin. Here, the thing is that these secondary antibiotics, doxy, clinton, are indicated when we have increased community prevalence of community acquired MRSA infection, which is actually we don't have data here. So here what we can do is we can first give antibiotics which are active against MSSA, such as cefalexin or cloxicillin, and if the patient is not responding to that, we can change over to MRSA treatment. For a severe infection, we need to have the source reduction. We need to do an IND and the pulse, and along with that, we need to give IV antibiotics. IV antibiotics also, cloxicillin, cefazolin, and coamoxiclav are needed for the MSSA. And if MRSA is suspected, we can give vancomycin or ticaplanin only in severe infection, not for moderate or mild infections. Now we'll go to the second group where there is non-purulent infection. We think that this is due to streptococcus. Here also for mild infection, we will here there is no pus collection, so we won't be able to do an IND. So for a mild infection, we will treat with oral antibiotics, and oral antibiotics, as we said, is cefalexin is the first drug that we are going to give, or you can either give doxycycline or clindamycin. Then if the patient is having a moderate infection with fever and all, we need to start on IV antibiotics. IV antibiotics for streptococcus, we can give ceftriaxone, cefazolin, or clindamycin. We can even give coamoxiclav. Even if penicillin is available, we can give penicillins also. Always for severe infections, we need to resort to the surgical treatment. When child may need debridement, fasciotomy, and so on, and along with that, we will continue IV antibiotics. And for streptococcus, there won't be any pus formation, but for severe infections with streptococcus, we need to send blood culture, aspirate, swab, or biopsy for getting a culture specimen. That completes the skin infections. Other than the SSF, this is a staphylococcal scalded skin syndrome, where all these skin manifestations are mainly due to the erythema, peeling, everything is mainly due to the toxin. If it is a mild SSF and localized SSF, it is always better to treat with oral antibiotics only. The same antibiotics, cefalexin, coamoxiclav, cloxicillin, are the ones which are indicated. And severe infections, very severe infections with systemic manifestations, only we need to go for IV antibiotics, because it's very difficult for us to give IV antibiotics also in children with extensive skin involvement. So most of the cases we prefer to treat with only oral antibiotics, and community acquired MRSA suspected, we can give clindamycin or vancomycin. Now we'll go to the second group of infection. This is a 6-year-old child with fever and sore throat. There is no upper respiratory infection. So we are moving from the skin, we are moving on to the upper respiratory tract infection. So 6-year-old child with fever, sore throat, no URI. So child is having a pharyngeal tonsillitis. As we said earlier, it could be bacterial infection or viral infection. The figure in the left, this figure actually shows a diffuse congestion of the pharynx and also posterior pharyngeal wall. There is not much of exudates or anything. So the most common one that we usually see is the viral pharyngeal tonsillitis, where usually the children will have URI and cough. Along with hoarseness of voice also. Usually we will get the history that the family members are also affected with upper respiratory infection. If palatal ulcers are there, it actually tells you that this means there is a high possibility that this is viral infection. If it is streptococcus, the other organism that produces pharyngitis is streptococcal tonsillitis. Usually they will have high fever and toxicity. Absence of fear, cough and URI is a pointer that this is likely to be a streptococcal infection. And on examination, we will see follicles and exudates, and the child will also have tender lymphadenopathy. There are different scoring systems are used to differentiate between these two. Only if we are thinking that this is streptococcal pharyngitis or tonsillitis, we need to start on antibiotics. And the antibiotic is penicillin only. Amoxicillin is the one that we usually use. As we said earlier, streptococcus has not developed any resistance to amoxicillin. So you will give the usual 45 to 50 milligram per kg per day in 2 divided doses. That is sufficient for streptococcal infection. Other antibiotics, we can also give oral penicillins for streptococcal infection. The only thing is that whenever we are giving antibiotics for streptococcal tonsillitis, we need to give antibiotics for 10 days. Second line antibiotics are used only when the patient is allergic to penicillin. When the patient cannot be offered any penicillin group of drug, then only we will think about the second dose antibiotics, and always treat for 10 days, except in the case of azithromycin, where we treat for 5 days. And the next is a 3-year-old child with history of nasal discharge and fever for 1 week. Mother was telling that the child was better for the last 3 days. Today he has fever. She has fever and increase in nasal discharge. So what is the child having? Child is mainly having rhinitis or rhinosinusitis. Okay, here also the viral is the most common one, and it is always self-limiting. But it can, rhinosinusitis can also be due to bacteria, and these are the 3 bacteria which are important causes of rhinosinusitis: pneumococcus, H. influenza, and Moraxella. So how will you differentiate whether it is a viral rhinitis or a bacterial rhinosinusitis? That is by looking at these 3 things. The first one is, we look for if it is a prolonged infection. That means rhinorrhea, nasal block, or daytime cough. These are the symptoms of rhinosinusitis. If it is lasting for more than 10 days, it is likely to be a bacterial one. Then the second is severe infection. That means urinary, nasal, or postnasal discharge which is lasting for more than 3 days, along with high fever. That is also likely to be having a bacterial infection. Then the third one is double sickening. That means a patient who was apparently improving from an upper respiratory infection is again getting sicker. So that is what our child was having. Double sickening also indicates a bacterial infection. So only if any one of these 3, prolonged rhinitis, severe rhinosinusitis, or double sickening is then an antibiotic is indicated. So which antibiotic will we give? As we said, these are the 3 organisms: pneumococcus, H. influenza, and Moraxella. Pneumococcus usually will be responding to penicillins and cephalosporins. But pneumococcus can develop resistance by alteration in the penicillin binding protein. So what will happen is there will be alteration in the penicillin binding protein, and the penicillins will not be effective for that pneumococcus. So but what we need to know is that we can overcome this resistance by increasing the dose of penicillin. So what you do is we give high dose amoxicillin. Okay. And beta-lactam inhibitors does not have any role in case of pneumococcal infection. There is no point in adding clavulanic acid if you think that the pneumococcus is resistant. So just by increasing the dose of penicillins, especially amoxicillin, we can overcome this problem. We think that the child may be having a resistant infection if the child had an antibiotic use within the last 3 months. If the child belongs to the extremes of age, for pediatrics, if it is less than 2 years, or if there is daycare attendant, the child may have, child is likely to have infection with resistant organism. In those cases, we are justified in starting amoxicillin at a higher dose. For H. influenza and Moraxella, both are sensitive to aminopenicillins and cephalosporins, but these organisms are beta-lactamase producing organisms, so they may respond to and to addition of clavulanic acid. So how to select antibiotic? As we said earlier, if the patient is having persistent infection, severe infection, or double sickening, we will assess the patient whether there is any risk factor for antibiotic resistance. If the patient has a risk factor for antibiotic resistance, then we will initiate second-line antibiotic therapy. If the patient does not have any risk factor, then we will initiate first-line antimicrobial therapy. So that is the principle. The first-line antimicrobial therapy is penicillin only. We can start either at 45 milligram per kg per day or 90 milligram per kg per day, depending upon the chance of the child having a resistant infection. So if our child had recent antibiotic, has daycare attendance, has any other comorbidities, we can start at 90 milligram per kg. And the second line antibiotics are amoxiclavulanic acid, cefuroxime, cefpodoxime, or ceftinir. Always treat for 10 days or 7 days after resolution of symptoms in a case of sinusitis. And if the patient is acutely ill with vomiting, we may even give ceftriaxone at 50 milligram per kg per day, but it is never given as a first-line drug. And macrolides and cotrimoxazole are not indicated for treatment of sinusitis. Our next child is a 2.5-year-old child with unilateral ear discharge for 1 day. 2.5-year-old child with unilateral ear discharge for 1 day. This is the picture of a tympanic membrane acute otitis media. Here also, it could be a viral one or a bacterial one. And if it is bacterial, the main organisms are Pneumococcus, H. influenza, mainly non-typeable H. influenza, and Moraxella, as we described in the case of sinusitis. So the antibiotic selection is similar. Here, whether we need to, if it is newborns, gram-negative infections can also occur, and in older children, school-going age group, even Streptococcus pyogenes can produce AOM. Here, whether we need to give antibiotics or not is depend on these three factors, that is severity of the infection, laterality of the infection, and age. If the patient is having severe infection as evidenced by severe otalgia lasting for more than 48 hours and high fever, or bilateral infection, or age less than 2 years, then we are justified in starting antibiotics when you see the patient. So these patients, that means severe infection, bilateral infection, and children less than 2 years, they are at high risk of complication. Then for those patients, we will start antibiotics whenever, as soon as we see the patient. If the patient is a child about 2 years of age with unilateral acute otitis media and which is non-severe, in those conditions, we need not start antibiotics as soon as we see the patient. We can first give symptomatic management with paracetamol for pain relief, then antihistamines and also nasal decongestants, and wait for 48 hours. If the patient is not improving, we will straight away start on antibiotics. I'm not going into the selection of antibiotics because it is similar to the acute otitis media. Amoxicillin is the first line drug. Now we will go to the lower respiratory infection. This is a 4-year-old child with fever and fast breathing, chest retractions. So child is having a pneumonia. So for pneumonia, we know that the commonest organism in all age group is pneumococcus, but viral infections are also predominant. But in case of pneumonia, since it is it is the most common cause of mortality in under 5 children, we will start on antibiotics if the child has features of either tachypnea or chest intolerance. The child will need antibiotic. Even if it is viral, we will start on antibiotics. This is the only conditions where we will give antibiotics even in office practice, even if it is a viral infection, because there are no clinical examination findings, X-ray findings, or lab investigation findings, which will clearly demarcate between a viral pneumonia and bacterial pneumonia. Here we are justified in starting antibiotic. As I said earlier, pneumococcus is the common organism in all age group, and in small kids we have H. influenza and Staph aureus also. As the age advances, above 5 years, chance of mycoplasma infection also increases. But we need to know is in the toddler age group, viral infection are the most common cause for pneumonia. So the first line drug for pneumonia is amoxicillin. The usual dose that we usually use is 45 milligram per kg per day in 3 divided doses. ARI controlled program recommends 40 milligram per kg per dose. That means 80 milligram per kg per day is recommended in the ARI control program. They recommend high dose because the first one is to overcome penicillin resistance, as we discussed earlier. The second is in the dosage schedule. Here we are giving only BD dose. We are giving only twice day dose. So in order to attain sufficient blood levels for 12 hours, we need to give a higher dose. So amoxicillin is the first line drug. The second line oral drugs are either cefuroxime or co-amoxiclavulanic acid. In children above 5 years, we can add macrolides or doxycycline for mycoplasma coverage. Mycoplasma actually does not have any cell wall and so will not respond to any penicillin group of drugs or cephalosporin group of drugs or any drug which acts on the cell wall. They need the other drugs such as macrolides or doxycycline. Nowadays, we see a lot of mycoplasma which are not responding to macrolides due to the antibiotic misuse only. Because as we said earlier, azithromycin is a very rampantly misused drug. So most of our mycoplasma are actually not responding to macrolides and we have to resort to doxycycline for clinical response. So how to treat severe pneumonia? Actually, this is out of our context. Then for severe pneumonia, we will admit the patient. For less than 3 months, we will give second or third generation cephalosporins. And about 3 months, ampicillin is the one that we start 200 milligram per kg per day. And if the patient is not responding, we can change over to co-amoxiclav or second or third generation cephalosporin and add macrolides or doxy if the patient is above 5 years. And always we need to keep in mind whether this could be a staphylococcal pneumonia, because if it is a staphylococcal pneumonia, the child will not respond to our usual antibiotic regimen and we need to give drugs for staphylococcal pneumonia. If the patient has any of this, patient suppose that it is an immunosuppressed patient or severely malnourished patient, we need to think about staphylococcal pneumonia in the outset itself. And also dangerously ill patient, any patient coming in shock with pneumonia, think about staphylococcal pneumonia. Whenever there is rapid worsening, other focus of staph infection, following measles, X-ray showing pneumatosis, all those conditions we need to think about staphylococcal pneumonia and give antibiotics for staphylococcus as we discussed earlier. For MSSA, we give clox, cefazolin, amoxiclav, etc. And for MRSA, if it is a severe infection with septic shock and all, you are justified in giving high-end antibiotic. Now we will move on to the next infection, that is a 2-year-old child with urine microscopy showing plenty of blood cells, urinary tract infection. Yeah. Here what we need to know is that if it is an older child, usually they will have typical clinical features of urinary tract infection. But if it is a young child, especially small young infants, they may not have any clinical features which points that this is a urinary tract infection. So for any child with fever, we actually need to look for a urinary tract infection. And urinary tract infection is considered as complicated UTI if the child has any features of pyelonephritis, as evidenced by high fever, systemic toxicity, renal angiotensinus, and deranged RFT. And when we look at the etiology, the most common cause for a urinary tract infection is always E. coli. It may be due to other organisms such as other gram-negative organisms like Klebsiella, Proteus, Pseudomonas, and Enterobacter. And whenever you get other organisms other than E. coli, we need to think whether the urinary tract is abnormal, because these organisms are more common in abnormal urinary tracts. And parenteral antibiotics are indicated only in children less than 2 months or any evidence of clinical urosepsis, as we discussed earlier. Patient has any immunocompromised patient, if the patient is not able to tolerate oral medications or patient is not responding to oral medications, then we can give parenteral antibiotics. Otherwise, we give oral antibiotics only. Parenteral antibiotic, the first drug that we usually use is third generation cephalosporin. Ceftriaxone is the one which because it has better renal excretion and high renal levels. And then we need to modify according to the culture and sensitivity result. If it is a complicated UTI, we give antibiotics for 7 to 14 days. Sometimes usually, and always make sure that we send urine culture and sensitivity before you start on antibiotics. Common problem that we usually see is that we will start on antibiotics and the patient will respond. And after 2 days, we will, after 2 or 3 days, we will get a culture which tells us that a patient and the organism is actually not is not sensitive to our antibiotics. That usually happens. Then just by looking at the culture report, we need not change our antibiotics. There is clinical response, because even if there is in vitro resistance, patient may have resistance in vivo, because these antibiotics will have a very high urinary and renal levels. For oral antibiotics, if there is no features of clinical sepsis or any complications as we described earlier, and it is an older child, we can very well start on oral antibiotics, and Cefixime is the oral antibiotics that we usually use, and it is effective for all gram-negative infections which produces urinary tract infection other than Pseudomonas, and fluoroquinolones are effective even for Pseudomonas. And carmoxyclavulanic acid is a broad spectrum antibiotic that can also be used. And clotrimazole can also be used for ESBL producing gram-negative infections. And nitrofurantoin should not be used for pyelonephritis because it does not achieve significant renal tissue levels. So this is the last group of infection, that is diarrhea. 8-month-old bottle-fed baby with diarrhea, no blood in stools, no failure to thrive. Most of the diarrhea are viral infection, and there is no need to start on antibiotic for a viral diarrhea. We just need to treat with ORS and zinc. Antibiotics are indicated only in acute invasive diarrhea and cholera. In acute invasive diarrhea, we will have visible blood in stools, not by using stool microscopy. By looking at these stools, you need to see blood. Then only we will consider it as acute invasive diarrhea. Then other indications are the child is having severe malnutrition, we will give antibiotics. If it is a small infant less than 2 months, we can give antibiotics. And then we treat other associated infection. Other than that, for an acute diarrheal disease, there is no role for antibiotics. And these are the organisms that we usually produce as AID. And what is the antibiotic that we need to prescribe? WHO recommends the first line antibiotics as ciprofloxacin 15 mg per kg per dose BED into 3 days. And these antibiotics, azithromycin, ceftriaxone, and Cefixime, are recommended as the second line antibiotics. But they also tell you that you can modify your antibiotics depending upon the local sensitivity. Here we have high incidence of analgesic acid resistance, and whenever your organism is resistant to analgesic acid, that Shigella is not going to respond to ciprofloxacin also. So we do not use ciprofloxacin as the first line oral drug for AID. We use the oral third generation cephalosporins. Oral Cefixime is a very good drug which is effective for acute invasive diarrhea as the first line drug. And if patient requires an IV treatment, then IV ceftriaxone is the drug that we usually use. So whenever you start on antibiotics for acute invasive diarrhea, we will reassess after 2 days and look for disappearance of fever and less blood in stools. Actually, blood need not disappear within 48 hours, but it has to decrease. Fewer stools and improvement in the general condition of the patient, then that tells you that your antibiotics is effective. We can continue with the same. And if it is cholera, the drugs recommended are doxycycline and erythromycin, but we actually don't see cases of cholera nowadays. Cholera occurs in epidemic. That actually completes the selection of antibiotics. We also need to know the likelihood of our patient harboring a resistant organism. That depends upon the type of your patient. The patients can be typed into 4 depending upon the exposure to the healthcare system and exposure to the antibiotics recently. Type 1 patients are the usual patients that we see in our OP. They don't have any contact with the healthcare system and no antibiotic used within the last 90 days and no comorbid conditions. And type 2 patients have some contact with the healthcare system with the minimal invasive procedures and antibiotics in the last 90 days and few comorbid conditions. These are the 2 types of patients that we usually see in our outpatient department. Type 3 and type 4 patients are only in the hospital. That I am not going to cover. The type 1 and type 2 patients, they are not likely to have higher infection with resistant organisms. In type 1, usually they may have bacterial infection with very minimal risk of MDR pathogens. They are unlikely to have fungal infection. Even for type 2, the most common infection they may have resistant organism that they may harbor is only MRSA. And some of them may harbor ES-Bal producing enterococci. Other non-fermenters such as Acinetobacter, Pseudomonas, all those things are very rare in type 2 patients. So for type 1 and type 2 patients, there is no need for us to use high-end antibiotics. For type 3 and type 4, then you may use high-end antibiotics, but that is not relevant in our topic. So for good antibiotic prescribing practices, what we need to know, the first one is investigate. Send cultures before we start antibiotics. And then follow hospital policy while prescribing and use the narrower spectrum antibiotic for the condition. Appropriate dose should be given and antibiotics should not be repeated. Never repeat 1, 2, 3 for antibiotics. On each day, we need to think whether the patient actually requires this antibiotics, whether we can stop this antibiotic or whether we can step down the antibiotics. And IV antibiotics should be given only for 48 to 72 hours without review. After 48 to 72 hours, we need to review and see whether we can de-escalate. Whether we can change from IV to oral, from broad spectrum to narrow spectrum, or stop. That we need to do every day after 48 hours. And in some conditions, we may have to start on empirical therapy. Then in those conditions, that diagnosis should be reviewed daily and treatment altered or stopped depending upon the microbiology. And lastly, there is no role for just in case antibiotics. The WHO has divided antibiotics into 3 groups. The access group is the first line antibiotic with low resistance potential, which can be used whenever indicated. And wash group of antibiotics have high resistance potential. So whenever we prescribe from the wash group, we need to be vigilant. And reserve group of antibiotics are antibiotics for MDR organisms and which has to be last resort antibiotic, not the first resort antibiotic. There is an extensive list. In the first access group, we have 29 antibiotics. In the wash group, we have some 8 or 7 groups of antibiotics. The thing that we need to know is the second and third generation cephalosporins are in the wash group. Macrolides are in the wash group. Vancomycin, meropenem, tazobactam, ciprofloxacin are in the wash group. And when we look at the reserve group, these are drugs which are reserved for MDR pathogens. The most misused drug that we nowadays see is the linezolid. Why? Because linezolid is available as oral preparation. So for every staphylococcal infection, we are prescribing linezolid, that should be avoided. Only by avoiding these things, we will be able to following this access aware policy, we will be able to cut down the irrational use of antibiotics. This is Zimmerwils who first propagated the hand washing infection control for prevention of infection. And if you're not following the antibiotics stewardship, in the near future, we will go into the next Zimmerwils era, where we don't have any antibiotics to treat the patient. We just have to concentrate on the infection control. So all the antibiotics should be handled with care. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bindusha, for that very lucid prescription. Actually, it was a It was like a prescription for each indication. But I'm sure there will be a lot of questions arising from that. But we will take the questions after our Sivaprasad enlighten us on the government program, the hub and spike model, which can be spread all over the state and fight the menace. Over to Dr. Sivaprasad.
Thank you, Riaz, sir. It was an excellent section by Bindusha madam. Respected senior members, my teachers, my family members, IAP and KGMOA. So this antimicrobial stewardship program is a very important program in concern to hospitals. And we know that AMR is a hidden threat lurking behind COVID-19, and we need One Health approach to tackle this issue. We know that if it is not addressed properly, the death due to AMR may rise to 20 million in 2050. As we know that 80% of antibiotic manufactured in USA used for veterinary purpose as a growth promoter. And 70% of antibiotic used in Europe also, they used as a growth promoter in poultry farms. How it is act as a growth promoter? So this broad spectrum antibiotic like colistin they are using, and when it will add to the feed, it will destroy the intestinal bacteria of that animal, and less food is needed for to become more fat, or they become more fat within less time. So it's a big lobby is having this as a poultry farm. So zoonotic disease, we know that zoonotic disease represents around 60% of emerging and re-emerging infection disease worldwide. And also we need a One Health approach to tackle this issue. And infection prevention control is the most important aspect of any antimicrobial stewardship program. So the 4 important components of AMR programs are infection prevention control, antibiotic stewardship program, rational antibiotic therapy, and the surveillance. There are 75,000 hospitals all over India, and less than 1% running effective antimicrobial stewardship program. But in USA, we know that 80% of hospitals having running some form of antimicrobial stewardship program. And we know that Kerala is the first state to release AMR action plan in 2018. AMR it also disturbed the sustainable development goals. We know that there are 17 goals are there, and the goals 1, 2, 3, 8, and 10 directly related to AMR. So its economic impact is also huge. As a pediatrician, we concern about this neonatal death. We know that drug-resistant bacterial infection due to the superbug drug infections, the neonatal death around 58,000 per year in India. And also intense antibiotic usage in animal farms and poultry and for agricultural purposes are strongly contribute to the emergence of antibiotic resistance. This is the economic impact of AMR, which is not addressed. This is around $66 trillion. So I'm coming to the point. So Kerala is the first state to release AMR action plan in 2018. In 2016, the work has started with the direction from the Honorable Chief Minister of Kerala, Sri Dattan sir, is a scientific advisor of Honorable CM, and he initiated all the process. And 2016 to 2018, within the span of 2 years, we had a lot of discussions. Many IAP members participate. Riaz sir was there, Santhosh Kumar sir was there, and also IMA and Medical College Health Service all together, and also our line department, most important, the veterinary, agri, fishery, pollution control, and environmental scientists. Everybody sit together. We formulate an action plan, and was released in 2018. So we know that there are 6 strategical action plan. These are 6 pillars of this AMR program. This is awareness and understanding. That's a training program. Knowledge and evidence, that depends on the lab surveillance. And infection prevention control. This is the most important aspect in controlling and emerging and re-emerging viral infections, and also bacterial infection, and optimal use of antibiotic. This is the fourth area where IAP has taken as a strategic partner to government for implementing the national antibiotic therapy and research innovation. This is the fifth one. Sixth is the collaboration with the private bodies. So the first one is the awareness and understanding. So it is the training, various training program we conduct regarding the antimicrobial resistance program. So what we done in Ernakulam. So when the COVID occurs, so what we done that we trained around 3,000 healthcare worker in infection prevention control under AMR platform. So when the pandemic hit, all the program become less active. So what we do that with the help of this antimicrobial stewardship program, we train our healthcare workers in infection prevention control and lab surveillance regarding COVID, and also we use our own faculties from health service department, and also with the help of from medical colleges, and even our Shrija madam was there, and also Arvind was there to conduct the training in Ernakulam. So this is the knowledge and evidence. This is the lab surveillance. As we know that state referral lab is the Department of Microbiology, Trivandrum Medical College, and our General Hospital Ernakulam and State Public Health Lab Trivandrum are the regional center to coordinate AMR surveillance in health service department. So I'm coming to our advanced spoke model program. So what is this advanced spoke model? It's a cost-effective way of communicating large hospitals and small hospitals, vice versa, in delivering service to the patients. And its dimensions include lab surveillance, training, telemedicine training, research initiative among the hub and spoke hospitals. That this policy proposal was put forward in 2018, and it took around 1.5 years to materialize. And in 2019, November 1st, in Kerala Pravi Dinam, this program was implemented in Ernakulam district, including the 6 taluk hospitals or this peripheral hospitals as a spoke. And 2020, again 7 more hospitals added, altogether 13 hospitals in 2020, and 2021, 15 hospitals are now participating in this program, including the COVID hospitals in the district. So how it is this program work? So initially, we know that General Hospital Ernakulam, they are running an antimicrobial stewardship program from 2015 onwards. After the 3 years of successful program, the government decided to expand this project to nearby taluk hospitals, so that the taluk hospital may empower in treating the patients, and the clinicians may empower there in treating the patients. So with the support from the NHM, and the vehicles, 2 or 3 vehicles, they are transporting the culture samples from these peripheral hospitals, and the samples are processed in the district AMR lab at General Hospital Ernakulam under the guidance of clinical microbiologists, and the report is generated and then sent to the mail to the respective institution. In every day before 2 p.m. the report will reach there, and the lab technician will take the printout and give the clinician, so that the clinician can choose the appropriate antibiotic for their patients. So this is the small form of what is happening in this advanced spoke model. Not only this transportation, we give training also, to all the peripheral hospitals, and empower the clinicians there, including from the pediatrician and physicians and surgeons. Everybody is trained to identify sepsis and sending cultures, appropriate cultures for the patients. So now 15 hospitals are included in this program, and this is materials with the help of National Health Mission of Ernakulam. So this model helped the peripheral hospital manage sepsis. So as we know that in health service department, in Ernakulam, the district general hospital has a special newborn care unit. But with the help of this project, we collected the culture samples from the nearby 8 delivery units, 8 neonatal unit, and the pediatrician sending a neonatal sepsis culture sample from this institution, and help them at the peripheral taluk hospitals to treat the neonatal sepsis properly also. So this was presented during 2020 national workshop, where 7 states from nearby state of Kerala participated. That was well appreciated. And during that time, around 7 hospitals are participated. In the end of the 2020, 13 hospitals are participated in this program. So this is the regional workshop of AMR, which took place in January 31st. Is the first COVID case detected in India, in Thrissur. This is February 1st, 2020. I still remember Sir and Madam coming from Thrissur to have our discussion with all the stakeholders. So our Kerala action plan was going to emulate by the 7 states of nearby state like Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Maharashtra, Goa, and Puducherry and Tamil Nadu. The stakeholders from higher officials came to Kochi, and we had fruitful discussions, and there slowly their states are also implementing this action plan. So this is the district AMR lab, where all the samples from the district, including culture samples, are processing. And it took around 7 years to reach this level. We started from our journey started from a small room at GH Ernakulam, and we now reached to serve the 15 hospitals in the Ernakulam districts as an advanced model, delivering clinical services, lab surveillance, and also clinical help to the clinicians to treat the patients. So after the implementation of hub-and-spoke model, now I told previously, November 1st, 2019, it has started within 1 year. Initially, we know that very difficult to initiate a program. So the response was poor initially, but still the hospitals have participated. And around we know that 234 samples we received from the spoke hospital, including COVID hospitals, and we had, this is the blood culture samples, and with the positivity rate of 8.97, and 6 hospitals initially participated. After 20 months, when it reached 20 months, what happened that during the wave of COVID, the hospitals are started to, more hospitals are included, including the COVID hospitals. Red line, these are the COVID hospitals in the Ernakulam district. They are started to send in the cultures. So we know that co-infections in a COVID is a deadly, especially in the severe cases, and ICM also point out that. So early identification of co-infection definitely will decrease the mortality in COVID also. So after 20 months, around 14 to 15 hospitals participated. We got around samples, around 4,000 samples with a positivity rate of 11.6%. Even the COVID Apex Center, we get good positivity rate. Not only the blood culture samples, we know for the surveillance, we need other samples also. So the spoke hospitals start to send the culture samples like pus, sputum, urine culture samples also, so that the clinician can choose appropriate antibiotic for their patients. So rightly I point out earlier, the ICMR told that the co-infection is COVID. So it's a very deadly thing. So when secondary infection with a multi-drug resistant organism occurs to a COVID patients, the mortality will rise to 80 to 90%. See, we know that gram-negative infections are more concern for us, as we discussed earlier. Because for treating a gram-positive infection, even MRSA, we got 3 to 5 drugs. But for a gram-negative superbug infection, we got only few drugs. Even in Western countries, the research is more towards gram-positive antibiotics, and because maybe less prevalent of, they're less concerned about these gram-negative infections. But in our developing countries, gram-negative infections are severe. And also they will produce deadly results also. So what we do is, with the help of the sub-and-spoke model, we collected samples from the COVID hospitals, including all the culture sample, blood, bronchial lavage, endotracheal aspirate, CSF, all the culture samples, and we help the clinicians there to treat the patient properly. And also this sepsis management and this AMR surveillance in the district function a unique hub-and-spoke model. with the GH AMR lab, collect and test the samples from the nearby 15 government hospitals that are spoke, thus avoiding the need of separate expensive laboratory of each of these hospitals. So we need only one center to empower, to have a good lab and good human resource in one center, and the services are given to the nearby and the neighboring taluk hospitals. So strategic priority 3 is the infection prevention control. So we should develop, implement IPC, that is infection prevention control program, and also strengthen the immunization coverage, strengthen the sterilization disinfection practices. So all the journey, all the history start from 2015 when Jamila Madam was the director of service. All the similarity what I find out is all are the pediatricians. Jamila Madam is there. Is the Madam was the pioneer of this program. Junai sir is a leader of our IAP, is a pediatrician, and also 2015 this program, first antibiotic stewardship program started in the service department. Initially they start to collect the neonatal sepsis cases only, restricted to neonatal unit only. Later within the hospital, all the department are contributing to the this program, like medicine, oncology, nephrology, cardiology, and also this super specialty and subspecialty are contributing to this program. And also this is a 1 year of that antibiotic stewardship program, 2016 I think, and Venkateswaran sir was the state IEP president. Everywhere we can see pediatricians. So pediatricians are very keen about implementing policies and antibiotic stewardship program in our state. And you can see Venkateswaran sir also in this picture. So within the year of 3 years, we are able to produce a sepsis registry. So within 3 years, all the blood culture samples we processed at the AMR lab, making it a registry. So this is around 295 culture positive samples we got from our registry, and also escalation, de-escalation. This is also shown in the slide, and also the outcome also. There we can able to cure around 68% of sepsis cases. That's from our experience. So this is most important. This is the antibiogram. So we can able to have a cumulative antibiogram of 3 years of blood culture. And you can see that the ESBL production, ESBL organism from blood, we get around 73%. Even E. coli club around 73 to 61%. So what we should understand that in periphery, when you use the common drug, we use a ceftriaxone, cefatoxime. These are more than 70% are resistant to the organism we isolate from the blood. So this is very important in policy proposals and making antibiotic policy. And again, it's a gram-positive organisms. Also, we could be able to make a antibiogram of a gram-positive organism from 3 years sepsis registry. This is what Bindusha Madam told, hand aging campaign. That's very important. And GH Ernakulam has taken a model. From we started an anti-aging campaign from hospital to community level. So we trained all the mothers in the maternity and maternity unit, and also the bystanders, so that the infection control activity be strengthened, not only the hospital, from the periphery level also. So this article came in Hindu, that the rigorous infection prevention control hospitals pay off. Even in the episode of Nipah and COVID, it helped the health service department or General Hospital Ernakulam to tide off the crisis. So next one is the optimal use of antibiotic, where the IAP is the key stakeholder, and also we should run antibiotic stewardship program in all major hospitals. As I told earlier, in 75,000 hospitals all over India, only 1% is accredited with some sort of accreditation like NABH or KGLP or NQS. KGLP and NQS for government hospitals, NABH for private hospitals. So we should able to implement some form of antimicrobial stewardship in all our hospitals. So this is our district ABAR committee, which formed as a DMO, as a chairman, We know that all the members are additional DMO and senior pediatricians, senior doctors, and also all the superintendent of the spoke hospitals included. We also give the terms of reference of district core working committee and working group. So this committee today, we have a discussion regarding the next phase of our antimicrobial stewardship program. So when you start a program, there should be an end point also. So everything started in 2015 as a small antimicrobial stewardship program. 2018, there was a policy proposal of hub and spoke model. 2019, it was expanded to nearby 6 hospitals. 2020, 7 more hospitals added, altogether 13 hospitals. 2021, 15 hospitals, including COVID hospitals, are coming under this program. Now we are going to have the second phase. We are planning to include the community health center also under this program. And also the end point of any antimicrobial stewardship program, it should reach the patient. So, and also for that, there should be an antibiotic policy in your institution. With the help of district AMR lab, with the help of microbiologists, we are able to produce an antibiogram, and it is very happy that it came in a GWAP as a general hospital Ernakulam or district, one of the hospital which has produced antibiotic policy. And we not only introduced the policy, we implement the policy and audited it, but still, even with this much effort, the adherence is around 60% only. That is a bitter truth. So we again discussion with the various departments. We can see that cardiology is there, neurosurgeon is there, even our surgeons are sitting there, and gynecology department there, superintendent is there. So we have discussion with the various departments to how to strengthen our prescription practices in our hospital. So this management, this is the article came in Hindu regarding neonatal sepsis management. So the hospitals are helped. This program helped the General Hospital Ernakulam SNCU to early identification of neonatal sepsis and treat properly. So what I think that I discussed with the DMO. So it should not be restricted to one hospital. So I previously discussed. Now we are getting sample from 8 delivery units, 8 neonatal units. So that the NBSU Perimbavur, NICU Aluva, SNCU GH, WNC Matanjeri, and also Kodamangal, which is a tribal area, near to tribal area. From that, all the neonatal units now sending culture sample. Within the span of 1.5 years, around 89 neonatal sepsis we are able to identify. And also, not only that, we are able to make an antibiogram from that. So this is a small, this is only a initial step. So we are getting only 89 samples from 1.5 years old. We are doing automatic technique, and so this will help to find out the resistant pattern or sensitivity pattern of the isolate we are getting from our neonatal units. So it will also help to formulate antibiotic policy in the hub and spoke hospitals also. So research is the most important aspect. So we know that our resource limiting system, so still we are able to have a first international article from regarding AMR in 2018. This is the first research article came as the part of AMR program from Health Service Department. Not only Health Service Department, from the Kerala. And also this is a case of a deadly superbug infection, that is a colistin resistant club infection in a sepsis in a 68-year-old patient. We could not save the patient. Patient died within the 48 hours of admission to the hospital. We isolated the organism. We sent to Rajiv Gandhi Center of Biotechnology, which is the research center for AMR action plan. They isolate the gene, that is MGRB gene, and sequence it, and it was published in the international articles. That is important. That what is important for MGRB gene? It's a chromosomal mediated transport. If you get MCR1, that's a cholesterol resistant one. It is a plasmid mediated. That when plasmid mediated resistance comes, it can transfer from one bacteria to another, like E. coli to club or club to E. coli. When chromosomal mediated, it will transfer to the next progeny also. So research is also important. We are able to produce 3 articles, 2 national and 1 international article from AMR platform from Ernakulam. So other thing is that we have to participation with other forms like IAP, IMA, APA, and also most important, we have to have a good relationship, our line department, veterinary, agri, Agri department also. So IAP as a chairperson of IAP AMR action plan, we know that we are conducting a lot of programs for the last week, and also we already submitted a project proposal for empowering the neonatal unit in early identification of neonatal sepsis across the state, and also a statewide antibiogram for neonatal sepsis. We already submitted the Kerala, and also a lot of antibiotic stewardship program training we conducted with the help of the central IAP and our own faculties. So this is very important. This is a key performance indicator. So when you start a program, you should assess the program where you stand now. So October 20, this I prepared as per the direction of our Principal Secretary Rajan sir. So we can assess where the district now stand. So October 28, only one hospitals are participating. March 21, which March 22, 2020 is 7, and now 13 hospitals. A number of hospitals start to send blood culture for a spoke model. October 2018, only one hospital. Now it's 13 hospitals. So number of research paper, that is the 6th one. Published AMR, October 2018, only one paper. Now it's 3. So this is the performance indicator you could make in your district, so that you can audit your performance, and also in the hospital wise and also district wise also. So what is the advantage of the abandoned spoke model? It's helped the spoke hospital identify sepsis early and treat it rationally. De-escalation of escalation of antibiotic as per culture sensitivity report is the most important aspect of antimicrobial stewardship program. And spoke hospitals through this initiative may implement antibiotic stewardship. Some extent they can implement their antimicrobial stewardship in their hospital. Program helps to find out the resistant pattern in the spoke hospital, and also there may help the AMR surveillance of the disease. So every month, Ernakulam GH, with the help of with the help of all these spoke hospital, they are collecting data, and the surveillance data is sent to Medical College from their health secretary through the app HUNET app. They are using this HUNET app. So GH is now the part of this AMR surveillance program. And also we know that sepsis is the major cause of neonatal mortality, and also an early identification of neonatal sepsis may help to reduce the mortality, infant mortality reduce, and also there may help the reduce IMR further. So 8 delivery points. Initially only what happened that the peripheral hospitals, they will refer the cases to GH Ernakulam. So now they are able to treat neonatal sepsis cases in their hospitals, and only in severe cases they are referring the cases to higher centers. So research initiative is also important. So you can help the spoke hospitals. You can help the spoke hospital to have a research initiative through this initiative, so that there will be a training programs how to do research work on AMR also. So it's a very cost-effective way of delivering lab service to the patients. So last week, Honorable Health Minister has had a review this program. So Madam told that, as my dear friend Praveen told previously, the sub-and-spoke model of Ernakulam initiative will be replicated to other diseases. So so this initiative take around 7 years to stand before you to present this program. So 2015 we started. Now 2021, it is more than, it's around 7 years we took to reach this level. So this is on all hospital, all district can do it, and also at Trivandrum, I think Trivandrum and Kozhikode has initiated the same in a minor forms. So what are the scope, limitation, challenges of AMR program? So AMR is a slow pandemic. It is looking behind COVID-19. We need a sustainable action plan under one health concept. So including the line departments, very important. As I told earlier, 80% of antibiotic produced in the world are used as a growth promoter in veterinary practice. So as a modern medicine doctor, our contribution to antimicrobial crisis globally is around 20%. Leapfrogging of lab surveillance is needed of. What is leapfrogging? We should go for genomic sequencing. So in COVID, we have done this genomic sequencing. So in AMR also, the lab should be sophisticated in such a way that they can go for genomic sequencing. Implementation antibiotic stewardship program across major and minor hospitals. It's a challenging because, as I discussed earlier, 75,000 hospitals all over in India, less than 1% running effective antimicrobial stewardship program. It is a challenging one, but we can do it. A research initiative AMR need to strengthen all the medical college health service department. Health service already prove it. So not only if GH Ernakulam can do it, GH Trivandrum can definitely can do it, and GH Kozhikode can do it. So it's the attitude matters, and also around 40 research articles published from all the department, including life department, from 2018 under the AMR platform. So my request to all the superintendents that you should prioritize the AMR program in your hospitals because it is directly related to infection prevention control, quality initiative like NQS, KLP, and NABH. It always helps to improve the quality of our hospitals. So hub and spoke model is a new policy proposal to address our AMR, which is a public health crisis. It's a small step, but a giant leap of AMR containment of the state. Thank you.
Thanks, Sivaprasad, for that elaborate account on the AMR hub and spike model. Now it is time for discussion. I will start with the question in the chat box, and then we will go on. The question is from Dr. Shija. It's about any recent studies on prevalence of various pathogens and their antibiotic sensitivity in LRTA. I think, can Sivaprasad answer this question from your collection of cases? Were there any? It's about the prevalence of various pathogens and their antibiotic sensitivity in lower respiratory tract infections in children in Kerala. Any evidence of re-emergence of non-typeable H influenza after introduction of the vaccine? Dr.
Bindusha. Recently,
നിങ്ങളുടെ അവിടുന്ന് ന്യൂമോണിയ കേസസ് എന്നൊക്കെ എന്തെങ്കിലും കിട്ടിയിട്ടുണ്ടോ? എന്തെങ്കിലും സാമ്പിൾസ് എന്ത് ഓർഗാനിസം?
നമുക്ക് അഡൽട്ട് കേസുകളുടെ ആണ് കൂടുതൽ മറ്റേ സ്പ്യൂട്ടം കാര്യങ്ങളിലും ബ്ലഡിലും കിട്ടുന്നുള്ളത്. പീഡിയാട്രിക്സിൽ ന്യൂബോൺ സെപ്സിസ് ഞാൻ സാറിന് നേരത്തെ പറഞ്ഞല്ലോ സാർ, ന്യൂയോണിറ്റിലും പീഡിയാട്രിക് കേസിലൂടെ അറൗണ്ട് ഒരു 80 to 90 കേസസ് ആണ് കിട്ടിയിട്ടുള്ളത്.
അതിൽ എന്തെങ്കിലും ആന്റിബയോഗ്രാമിനെ കുറിച്ച് പറയാനുണ്ടോ?
ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞിരുന്നു. പക്ഷെ അങ്ങനെ ഒരു ഹൈലി റെസിസ്റ്റന്റ് ന്യൂയോണിറ്റിസെപ്സിസ് പറയുകയാണെങ്കിൽ അങ്ങനെ ഒരു ഹൈലി റെസിസ്റ്റന്റ് ആയിട്ടുള്ള സാധനം കിട്ടിയിട്ടില്ല, നമുക്ക് കാണാറില്ല. നമുക്ക് ഈക്കോളെ കിട്ടുന്നുണ്ട്, ക്ലബ് ഉണ്ട്, ആൻഡ് ഓൾസോ ഗ്രാം പോസിറ്റീവ് സ്റ്റാഫോറിസിസ് കോമൺ ആയി കിട്ടുന്നുണ്ട്. പിന്നെ നമ്മുടെ തന്നെ ഹോസ്പിറ്റലിൽ തന്നെ ഇപ്പൊ ഇഫ് യു ഗോ ടു ഓങ്കോളജി ഓർ അതർ ദിസ് യൂറോളജി ഡിപ്പാർട്ട്മെന്റ്, we are getting highly resistant like this even CRE, carbapenem resistant enterobacteria, or CRAB, carbapenem resistant acinetobacter infection. This like highly resistant. When we are only one case of cholesterol resistant we get this LRA in children, and because we know the sputum or culture sensitivity. That is in my experience. I have not come across such a case, sir. Anyway, I will look into that, sir.
Bindusha, do you want to add?
We don't have any community studies actually. Lower respiratory tract infection community studies whatever studies are there actually are from hospitals. Hospitals it's entirely different. Hospital acquired infection
നമുക്കൊരു ന്യൂമോണിയ സ്റ്റഡി ഉണ്ടല്ലോ നമ്മുടെ അവിടെ. ഡോക്ടർ പ്രിയ ഉണ്ടോ? എന്തെങ്കിലും അതിനെ കുറിച്ച് പറയാമോ? Organism identification. Okay. So there is another question regarding the transport and culture medium logistics in the program. Sivaprasad.
Sir, അത് ചെയ്യുന്നത് NHMന്റെ സപ്പോർട്ട് കൂടിയാണ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്. അപ്പൊ നോട്ട് ഓൺലി ദ AMR സാമ്പിൾസ്, അതിനകത്ത് even this is a neonatal newborn metabolic screening samples, histopathology samples, and also this TB, tuberculosis in the sputum AFB samples. ഇതെല്ലാം കൂടി ചേർന്ന് ഒരു രീതിയിലാണ് അവർ ട്രാൻസ്പോർട്ടേഷൻ ചെയ്യുന്നത്. അപ്പൊ അതിനകത്ത് ഒരു ഭാഗം മാത്രമേ ആന്റിമൈക്രോബിയൽ ശുപാർശ പ്രോഗ്രാമിന് തന്നിട്ടുള്ളത്. അപ്പൊ അത് നമുക്ക് അറൗണ്ട് ഒരു 20,000 സാമ്പിൾസ് പെർ മന്ത് ഇതുവഴി ട്രാൻസ്പോർട്ട് ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ട്. അപ്പൊ ഇത് കോസ്റ്റ് എഫക്റ്റീവ് ആവേണ്ട ലോജിസ്റ്റിക് ഒരു കോസ്റ്റ് വെച്ച് പറയുകയാണെങ്കിൽ ഒരു സാമ്പിൾ ട്രാൻസ്പോർട്ടേഷൻ ചെയ്യുന്നതിന് ഇപ്പൊ നമ്പർ ഓഫ് സാമ്പിൾസ് കൂടുമ്പോൾ അറൗണ്ട് 30 rupees ആണ് അറൗണ്ട് വരുന്നത് ട്രാൻസ്പോർട്ടേഷൻ ചാർജ് ആയിട്ട്. നമുക്ക് ഉദാഹരണം ഒരു അത്രയും കേസുകൾ അത്രയും സാധനങ്ങൾ ട്രാൻസ്പോർട്ട് ചെയ്ത് വരുമ്പോഴത്തേക്ക് ഒരു അറൗണ്ട് 30 കേസ്. ഇപ്പൊ ട്രാൻസ്പോർട്ടേഷന്റെ സാമ്പിൾസ് കുറയുമ്പോൾ ഇറ്റ് മേ റൈസ് ടു 60 cases, 60 per one case like that. സോ അതിനകത്ത് ആന്റിമൈക്രോബിയൽ ശുപാർശ പ്രോഗ്രാം മാത്രമായിട്ടല്ല അഡ്വാൻസ് ബ്ലോക്ക് മോഡൽ എറണാകുളത്ത് ഇംപ്ലിമെന്റ്. ആക്ച്വലി ദ പോളിസി പ്രപ്പോസൽ വാസ് ത്രൂ ആന്റിമൈക്രോബിയൽ ശുപാർശ പ്രോഗ്രാം ആണെങ്കിലും ഇത് ഇംപ്ലിമെന്റ് ചെയ്ത് വന്നപ്പോൾ all samples including the histopathology samples, അപ്പം നമ്മുടെ പെരിഫറി എന്നുള്ള താലൂക്ക് ഹോസ്പിറ്റൽസ് എന്നുള്ള അവര് FNAC സാമ്പിൾസ് അയക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. അതുപോലത്തെ ന്യൂ ബോൺ മെറ്റബോളിക് സ്ക്രീനിങ് സാമ്പിൾസ്, ആൻഡ് ഓൾസോ ദിസ് ഇസ് ട്യൂബർകുലോസിന്റെ സാമ്പിൾസ്. സോ ഓൾ ടുഗദർ അതൊരു NHM ഒരു ഇന്റഗ്രേറ്റഡ് സാമ്പിൾ ട്രാൻസ്പോർട്ടിംഗ് സിസ്റ്റം എന്നുള്ള സിസ്റ്റത്തിന്റെ ഭാഗമായിട്ടാണ് കൊണ്ടുപോകുന്നത്. അങ്ങനെയാണ് ചെയ്യുന്നത് സാർ.
You are able to transport the samples every day. There is no delay in transport.
സൺഡേസിൽ ചെയ്യുന്നില്ല, ബാക്കി എല്ലാ ദിവസങ്ങളിലും അത് ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ട്, കറക്റ്റ് ആയിട്ട് ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ട്. സൺഡേ മാത്രമാണ് ഒരു ഇത് വരുന്നത്. പക്ഷെ ഒരു എമർജൻസി സിറ്റുവേഷൻസിൽ അവർ ആവശ്യപ്പെട്ട് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ അത് അവർ ചെയ്യുന്നുണ്ട്. യൂഷ്വലി യൂഷ്വലി അവർക്ക് ഒരു സൺഡേ ട്രാൻസ്പോർട്ടേഷൻ ഇല്ല. പക്ഷെ സാറിന് അറിയാലോ ബ്ലഡ് കൾച്ചർ മറ്റു കാര്യങ്ങളൊക്കെ വരുമ്പോഴത്തേക്ക് അങ്ങനെ ഒരു ക്രൂഷ്യൽ കട്ടിംഗ് എഡ്ജ് കേസുകൾ വരുമ്പോഴത്തേക്ക് individual cases അത് അവർ അസസ് ചെയ്തിട്ട്
വേറെ ചാറ്റ് ബോക്സിലെ ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻസ് ഇല്ല. may I invite some comments and piece of knowledge from Parvati madam and Lalitha madam ഉണ്ട് ഇവിടെ. Please madam.
Can I? It's really I think it's just a comment. It's really so fortunate to attend these two sessions. One is rational antibiotic use. I think that is a subject which is close to my heart. And well done, Bindusha.
Thank you, ma'am.
And then second, of course, it's really fascinating and surprising to hear Dr. Sivaprasad, how much effort that they have put in, especially from the General Hospital Ernakulam, to implement this hub and spoke model, and showing that with that much of sincere and commitment, we can do anything. Even from a community level or general hospital, I think they can do so much. That means it has to be implemented all across. So hats off to you, Sivaprasad. I cannot just even imagine as such a timid boy turning into such an extent.
Madam, thank you, madam. ഞാൻ എപ്പോഴും പറയാറുണ്ട്, പണ്ട് പിന്നെ PG ചെയ്യുമ്പോ മാഡം പഠിപ്പിച്ച കാര്യങ്ങൾ മനസ്സിലാക്കി എടുക്കാൻ ഒരു 10 വർഷം എടുത്തു പറയാറുണ്ട്. പലപ്പോഴും നമ്മൾ പണ്ട് മാഡം പറയല്ലോ ഇതിന് വളരെ
ആന്റിബയോട്ടിക് സ്റ്റാർട്ട് ചെയ്തല്ലേ.
അതെ സാർ. അപ്പൊ നമുക്ക് അറിഞ്ഞൂടല്ലോ, നമ്മളന്ന് കൊച്ചു പയ്യന്മാരെ അവിടെ നിന്ന് കാര്യം മാഡത്തിന്റെ പേടിയാണ് സത്യത്തില്. അപ്പൊ ചോദിക്കാനൊക്കെ പേടിയാണ്. അപ്പം അത് മനസ്സിലാക്കിയെടുക്കാൻ അറൗണ്ട് 10 years എടുത്തു എന്നാണ് സത്യം. ഇപ്പോഴും മനസ്സിലായിട്ടുണ്ടെന്ന് അറിഞ്ഞുകൂടാ, പക്ഷെ എന്താ പറയാ, പക്ഷെ മാഡം പറഞ്ഞു തന്ന കാര്യങ്ങൾ മാത്രമേ ചെയ്തിട്ടുള്ളൂ. മാഡവും സന്തോഷ് സാറും എലിസബത്ത് മാഡം ഒക്കെ പറഞ്ഞു തന്ന കാര്യം, പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് പിന്നെ എന്നെ ഇതിലോട്ട് കൊണ്ടുവന്ന റിയാസ് സാറാണ് കേട്ടോ, അത് പറയാതിരിക്കാൻ പറ്റില്ല. IIPയുടെ മറ്റേ ഗവൺമെന്റിന്റെ ആക്ഷൻ പ്ലാനില് എന്നെ കൊണ്ടുവന്ന സന്തോഷ് സാറും റിയാസ് സാറും ആണ്. അതിന് പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് റിയാസ് സാറിനോട് വളരെ നന്ദിയുണ്ട്. അന്ന് എന്നൊരു ഫോക്കൽ പോയിന്റ് ഓഫ് കോണ്ടാക്ട് ആയിട്ട് അന്ന് WHO റെപ്രസെന്റേറ്റീവ്സ് ഉള്ള ഒരു മീറ്റിംഗിൽ സാറാണ് സജസ്റ്റ് ചെയ്തത്. പിന്നെ അതൊരു നിയോഗം പോലെ കൊണ്ടുപോയി മാഡം. പക്ഷെ ഞാൻ SIT പഠിച്ചേക്കുള്ളൊന്നും ചെയ്തിട്ടില്ല മാഡം, അതാണ് സത്യം. അതിനെനിക്ക് തുറന്നു പറയുന്ന യാതൊരു മടിയുമില്ല.
Whatever you have, I think you have learned, or whatever you have understood, you are able to do it. No, that is the one thing. But again, as you said in the last part, I think the attitude of the doctors matters. I think all sudden then every year we observe this antimicrobial awareness program and antibiotic resistance program. Still, I think our colleagues, whoever be it, specialists or analysts, whoever, I think still the antibiotic usage is, or antibiotics are still misused. It's really a saddening thing. So I think at least after hearing these topics, and at least if we are able to change at least one person's mind, that is, think before you ink. That is the most important thing. Just think, because as you I told, I think one of the two more antibiotics that have been misused like anything is the azithromycin. Azithromycin, especially as Dr. Riaz told, during the COVID, I think especially in the initial period, and azithromycin has been used extensively, initial part. And that actually that drug has to be kept as a reserve drug because that has so much of immunomodulating event and all. And then another, of course, as all of us are aware, the cefixime. So these are the most misused antibiotics. And at least I think we can reserve these two antibiotics in future. I think that will do a good, or so much good in the future of, I think, combating our antibiotic resistance. Nothing more than that. All the best in your future endeavor, Sivaprasad. Thank you. Thank you, Riaz.
Thank you, madam. Santhosh sir undennu thonnu. Parvati madamine കാണുന്നില്ല. Santhosh sir. Santhosh sir ഞാൻ കണ്ടിരുന്നതായിരുന്നു.
Santhosh Kumar sir ഇല്ലേ sir?
Santhosh Kumar sir ഇല്ല അല്ലേ? Okay. Indumati madam,
yes,
madam.
Yeah, actually, I really enjoyed both the talks, Lilva madam പറഞ്ഞു പോലെ, and I'm part of the AMR program in our hospital. So I know that I very much know many of these things, what has been said, and I really appreciate what Sivaprasad has taken up as a huge task. It's really appreciable because in this setting, you have done a lot of work, and I hope it trickles into the community and into each and every person, and it's very important. And Madam Parnavole, it is sometimes very disheartening when you see a lot of higher end antibiotics being used just like that. And what we have also learned now in the newborn period, that we are able to stop antibiotics and we are not misusing much of antibiotics. And we see our babies also, even the preemies, coming out very well. And it's very heartening note to see all those. So use of antibiotics in the right method, right time, as Bindusha said, is really good. And I really am happy of attending these two talks. And I congratulate both the speakers and wish them all the best. Thank you. Thank you, Riaz, for calling me.
Thank you, madam. As a last comment, I think I'm seeing Dr. Arya here. Dr. Arya is the microbiologist who is looking after the antibiotic program, isn't it, Sivaprasad?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Arya is also wife of Sivaprasad. And can Arya speak a little about the cultures, because we are interested in knowing what are the organisms, and one word, please, if you are ready.
Thank you, sir. Hello.
You are audible.
Sir, thank you, sir, for calling me. Actually, as Dr. Sivaprasad has said, we have started the program right from 2015. By around 6 to 7 years, we are reaching this stage of including 15 hospitals, 15 peripheral hospitals into this program. And so now we are getting samples from 15 hospitals, including 5 COVID hospitals. We are getting all the samples, including blood, CSF, urine, sputum, endotracheal aspirate, suction aspirate. Likewise, all the samples we are receiving here. And as far as possible, we are processing the samples, and without any delay, we are giving the reports by in the online platforms, sir. Through the help of NHM, actually, we are with the help of district administration and NHM, we are able to continue this program successfully. And now we are happy that this program will be emulated in all the districts in Ernakulam. In the state. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Arya. And I may request Dr. Praveen, Bindusha, and also many KGMOA leaders are here. Let this program begin in our district also. And with that note, I hand over the mic back to Praveen. Thank you.
താങ്ക് യു റിയാസ് സർ. അപ്പം ഈ ഫാമിലിയിൽ ഒരാളും കൂടെ ഇവിടെ ഉണ്ട്. നമ്മുടെ ശിവപ്രസാദിന്റെ അനിയനാണ് നമ്മുടെ KGMOA സെക്രട്ടറി പത്മപ്രസാദ്. അപ്പൊ നമ്മൾ ഈ പ്രോഗ്രാം പറഞ്ഞപ്പോൾ തന്നെ വളരെ സന്തോഷത്തോടു കൂടി ഇതൊരു KGMOA പ്ലസ് IAP പ്രോഗ്രാം ആക്കി മാറ്റിയ പത്മപ്രസാദും അതേപോലെ KGMOA പ്രസിഡന്റ് സന്തോഷ് സാറിനും ആദ്യമായിട്ട് നന്ദി പറയുന്നു. അതേപോലെ ഇന്നത്തെ സ്പീക്കേഴ്സ് ബിന്ദുഷ മാഡം ഈ ആന്റിബയോട്ടിക് ഓരോ സിനേറിയോയിലും എന്ത് കൊടുക്കണമെന്ന് വളരെ ഡീറ്റെയിൽഡ് ആയിട്ട് നമുക്ക് ജനറൽ പ്രാക്ടീഷണേഴ്സിനും അതേപോലെ തന്നെ പീഡിയാട്രീഷ്യൻസിനും പ്രയോജനകരമായ രീതിയിൽ വളരെ ഡീറ്റെയിൽഡ് ആയിട്ട് പറഞ്ഞു. താങ്ക് യു ബിന്ദുഷ മാഡം. പിന്നെ നമുക്ക് എല്ലാവർക്കും അഭിമാനകരമായ ഒരു പ്രോജക്റ്റ് എറണാകുളം ജില്ലയിൽ നടക്കുന്നത് എല്ലാവരും അറിയണമെന്നുള്ള ഒരു ഉദ്ദേശത്തിൽ തന്നെയാണ് ശിവപ്രസാദിനെ ഈ ഒരു ടോക്കനായിട്ട് ക്ഷണിച്ചത്. ശിവപ്രസാദിനെ ലളിത മാഡം പറഞ്ഞ പോലെ എല്ലാവരുടെയും ഒരു കൺഗ്രാജുലേഷൻസും അതേപോലെ ബാക്കി ജില്ലകളിൽ ഇത് തുടങ്ങാനുള്ള ഒരു ഇനിഷ്യേറ്റീവ് ശിവപ്രസാദ് സ്റ്റേറ്റ് കോർഡിനേറ്റർ എന്നുള്ള നിലയിൽ ചെയ്യുമെന്ന് പ്രതീക്ഷിക്കുന്നു. ശിവപ്രസാദിന് ഒരിക്കൽ കൂടി IAP തിരുവനന്തപുരത്തിന്റെയും KGMOയുടെയും പേരിൽ നന്ദി പറയുന്നു. പിന്നെ നമ്മുടെ മോഡറേറ്റർ റിയാസ് സാറിന് പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് നന്ദി പറയേണ്ട ആവശ്യമില്ല, എങ്കിലും ഒന്നുകൂടെ നന്ദി പറയുന്നു. പിന്നെ ഇന്ന് വളരെ സീനിയർ ഡോക്ടേഴ്സ് നമ്മുടെ പ്രിയപ്പെട്ട ലളിത മാഡം ആദ്യം മുതലേ തന്നെ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. വളരെ ആക്റ്റീവായിട്ട് കമന്റ്സ് ഒക്കെ പറഞ്ഞു. ലളിത മാഡത്തിനും അതേപോലെ വളരെ സീനിയർ ഡോക്ടേഴ്സ് എല്ലാവർക്കും ഒരിക്കൽ കൂടി നന്ദി പറയുന്നു. ഫൈനൽ ഒരു കൺക്ലൂഡിംഗ് റിമാർക്സിനായിട്ട് പത്മപ്രസാദിനെ ഒന്ന് ക്ഷണിക്കും.
എല്ലാവർക്കും നമസ്കാരം. ഇതുപോലെ കാലിക പ്രസക്തിയുള്ള ഒരു വിഷയത്തെ ഇത്ര പ്രാക്ടിക്കൽ ഇംപ്ലിക്കേഷനോട് അവതരിപ്പിച്ച രണ്ട് സ്പീക്കേഴ്സിനും സത്യം പറഞ്ഞ അപ്രീഷിയേഷൻ പോരാ. ഇത് തുടർന്നും ബാക്കി ജില്ലകളിലേക്ക് കൂടി വ്യാപിപ്പിച്ച് നമ്മുടെ പെരിഫറിയിലാണ് ഈ ആന്റിബയോട്ടിക് മിസ്യൂസ് നല്ലപോലെ ഉള്ളത്. കാരണം ബാക്കിയുള്ള ഒരു റെപ്യൂട്ടഡ് ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂഷൻസിലെല്ലാം ഒരു പ്രോട്ടോകോൾ ഉണ്ട്, ആന്റി മൈക്രോബിയൽ തെറാപ്പിക്ക് ഒരു ട്രീറ്റ്മെന്റ് പ്രോട്ടോകോൾ ഉണ്ട്. അപ്പൊ അതനുസരിച്ചാണ് ബാക്കിയുള്ള മേജർ ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂഷനിലും മെഡിക്കൽ കോളേജിലായാലും ശരി സീനിയർ പ്രൊഫസേഴ്സിന്റെ അണ്ടറിൽ ഒരു പ്രോട്ടോകോൾ വെച്ചാണ് എല്ലാം ചെയ്യുന്നത്. പക്ഷേ പെരിഫറിയിലിരിക്കുന്ന ജനറൽ പ്രാക്ടീഷണേഴ്സ് ആണ് ഇതിനെല്ലാം വയലേറ്റ് ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ട് അതിന് പക്ഷെ ഒരു പബ്ലിക്കും ഒരു റീസൺ ആണ്. കാരണം ഒരു ദിവസം പോയി കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ അന്ന് കുറഞ്ഞില്ലെങ്കിൽ അത് മോശം ഡോക്ടറാണ് എന്നുള്ള ഒരു പ്രതീതി വരികയും അപ്പൊ അത് മറച്ചു വെക്കാനുള്ള വ്യഗ്രതയിലാണ് പല ഡോക്ടേഴ്സും ആദ്യമേ കൂടിയ ആന്റിബയോട്ടിക്സുകൾ എല്ലാം ട്രൈ ചെയ്യാൻ ശ്രമിക്കുന്നത്. ജനറൽ പ്രാക്ടീഷണേഴ്സിന്റെ ഇടയ്ക്കുള്ള ഒരു കോമ്പറ്റീഷന്റെ ഭാഗം കൂടിയാണ്. അതിന് നമ്മളും ഉത്തരവാദികളാണ്. അതുപോലെ തന്നെ ഡോക്ടേഴ്സ് പേഷ്യൻസും. ഒരു കുഞ്ഞിനെ കൊണ്ടുവന്നു, അതിനപ്പോ അയ്യോ ഡോക്ടർ ആന്റിബയോട്ടിക് എഴുതിയില്ലോ, അപ്പൊ അത് എന്താ ഡോക്ടർക്ക് അത് അറിയാത്തോണ്ടാണോ എന്നുള്ള ചിന്ത നമ്മുടെ സാധാരണ റൂറൽ ഏരിയയിൽ പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് ഉണ്ട്. അതുകൊണ്ട് അതും മറച്ചു വെക്കാനായിട്ട് അവരെ കൺവിൻസ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റാത്തതുകൊണ്ട് പല ഡോക്ടേഴ്സും ആന്റിബയോട്ടിക്കുകൾ ആദ്യമേ ഫസ്റ്റ് വിസിറ്റിൽ തന്നെ എഴുതുന്നത് നമ്മൾ കണ്ടിട്ടുണ്ട്. ലിനിസോളൈഡ് ഒക്കെ യൂസ് ചെയ്യുന്ന പെരിഫറി BSc MOs ഒക്കെ ഉണ്ട്. അപ്പൊ അതൊക്കെ എന്തിന്റെ ബേസിസിലാണെന്ന് നമുക്കറിയില്ല. പക്ഷെ ഇതുപോലെ ഒരു ആന്റിമൈക്രോബിയൽ AMR കണ്ടെയ്ൻമെന്റ് പ്രോഗ്രാം അത് വൈഡ് സ്പ്രെഡ് ആയിട്ട് എല്ലാ ജില്ലകളിലും എല്ലാ മേജർ ഇൻസ്റ്റിറ്റ്യൂഷന്റെ കീഴിലും ഹെൽത്ത് സർവീസിന്റെയും DMEയുടെ കീഴിലും എല്ലാം വൈഡ് സ്പ്രെഡ് ആയിട്ട് വന്നു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ നമ്മളുടെ പെരിഫറൽ MOസിനെ എൻലൈറ്റൻ ചെയ്ത് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ തന്നെ നമ്മളുടെ കമ്മ്യൂണിറ്റിയിൽ ഉണ്ടാവുന്ന ഒരു ദൂഷ്യഫലം അത് നല്ല രീതിയിൽ കുറയ്ക്കാൻ സാധിക്കുമെന്ന് പ്രതീക്ഷിക്കുന്നു. ഇവിടെ ബിന്ദുഷ മേഡവും പിന്നെ ഡോക്ടർ ശിവപ്രസാദ് എൻ്റെ ചേട്ടനാണ്. അപ്പം അദ്ദേഹവും നല്ല രീതിയിൽ കാര്യങ്ങൾ അവതരിപ്പിച്ചു. രണ്ടുപേർക്കും കൺഗ്രാറ്റ്സ്. KGMOയുടെ പേരിലുള്ള നന്ദി അറിയിക്കുകയാണ്. താങ്ക് യു.
വളരെ നന്ദി ശിവപ്രസാദ്. നമുക്ക് ഇന്നത്തെ ഈ പ്രോഗ്രാം അവസാനിപ്പിക്കാമെന്ന് തോന്നുന്നു. ഒരിക്കൽ കൂടി എല്ലാവർക്കും നന്ദി. ഗുഡ് നൈറ്റ്. റിയാസ് സർ വേറെ ഒന്നും പറയാനില്ലല്ലോ?
ഇല്ല. ഗുഡ് നൈറ്റ്. ഇത് ഈ പ്രോഗ്രാം എത്രയും പെട്ടെന്ന് ട്രിവാൻഡ്രത്ത് തുടങ്ങും.
അത് വേണ്ടതാണ്.
അതെ.
താങ്ക് യു.
ഗുഡ് നൈറ്റ്.